Hi, this is Micah Sutton. I'm completing week 6 assignment of providing a diagnosis. We were asked to choose between 3 films that were depicted on 3 real living people. Excuse me, Howard Hughes, Virginia Woolf, and Sylvia Plath. And from those movies and also from the person's life, tried to provide a diagnosis for their mental illnesses and also a treatment plan. I chose Miss Plath, and I did so because I too am a poet, and poets I always felt like had such an interesting course of life, and sometimes it ended very tragically, as it did with Miss Plath committing suicide. But I did sort of a twist in her story with my treatment plan. I Even though I know that she has since passed on, I chose to sort of create another avenue to help me help her and provide her with a treatment plan. So I hope that I mastered that. So I'm going to try to condense the information about her life as much as possible. She grew up with both parents. Her father was very well educated at Boston University. He was a biologist and a botanist. Her mom was an immigrant, I believe, from Austria, and very traditional wife, a stay-at-home wife. But Sylvia was very close to her mom as well as her father. She showed a lot of artistic and promise. As a child, she wrote a lot of books and also painted, in which she was awarded for. Her father died when she was 8 years old, and she took it really hard. I think she probably more identified with her father than her mom, because Miss Plath was so artistically inclined, and also she liked school. So she was very educated in her own right. But yeah, she took her father's death really hard. As a teenager and as a young college student, she excelled academically. And I think it was her sophomore year of college, she was asked to be an editor in a magazine. So she had a lot of, influence with her poems and that. And so she got the opportunity to travel to New York to, I think, interview some poets and also promote the magazine. But when she got to New York, I think she was very disenchanted at how, I don't know, big the city was. I think it was really kind of a culture shock, if you will, for her. I think it was just not really what she was expecting at the time. She had an experience of, she was really, I think, liking this one poet that she was trying to interview, and they could never seem to meet. I think it was more so the timing was wrong, but she took it really personally, and that's where she attempted suicide by slashing her wrist. Also, she was trying to gain admission into a writing seminar at Harvard, but she was denied. And so that, coupled with the fact that while in New York she was almost raped, that she again attempted suicide, and that led to her being institutionalized and receiving her first round of electric shock therapy, which did not go well because she did not have a working therapeutic relationship with her therapist at the time. She did eventually receive another therapist, and that therapy went a lot better. Also, she encountered another a patient, I believe it was, that also was going through a lot of mental illness at that time, and they became very close, I think, to, through the years of Miss Plath's life. And this lady was Olive Higgins Prouty. She was, again, another poet that was struggling with mental illness, but seemed to have come out of, hers with treatment, of course, very positively. And I think that Sylvia really likened to that. And so Miss Prouty became a financial benefactress for Miss Plath, and also a friend throughout the years. So Miss Plath continued on with her education, graduated with honors, but she also met another poet, Mr. Ted Hughes, in which they had a kind of a whirlwind romance and eventually got married, I think, within a year of meeting each other. But they both took jobs in I think Amherst University in Massachusetts, where Sylvia was a like an English professor, and Mr. Hughes taught taught impromptu classes in poetry, and was also a poet laureate on the campus. And so he received a lot of accolade and notoriety on the campus. He was kind of like a local celebrity at that time, and so with that came a lot of attention and also a lot of recognition. And I think during that time, Miss Plath was just really trying to find her footing and also her place in being a poet. I don't think that she was very confident in her writing, even though as a child, and also as a young adult, she experienced a lot of reward and recognition in her own right. But I don't think personally she was very confident of her ability to write. And I think it really was to the detriment of her, to her self-esteem and her self-worth, and what her capabilities were. So eventually she and Mr. Hughes moved to London at that time, or a little city outside of London, and they had their first child. And they were both trying to gain notoriety and recognition in England. And it was during that time that she wrote her critically acclaimed book, now, The Bell Jar. And shortly after that, she had I think she had a miscarriage, which of course that again was really a sad time for her. And they took a little cottage and they were renting it out. And Mr. Hughes began to have an affair a little bit later on, after that. After the birth of their second child, he started to have an affair, and Miss Plath attempted suicide again, but she moved out. And at that time, she, I guess professionally, was very productive, writing like over 50 poems within a span of like a week or two. But personally, she wasn't doing that well. I think she was hardly sleeping, hardly eating, just more so writing. Her living conditions were unfavorable in that she had no heat, and it was like I think one of the coldest times that the city that she was living in had seen in years. She didn't have light. She was taking care of two very small children, one of which I think her son was like very colicky, so he was crying a lot. So, I think those contributing factors, and then her own internal struggles is what ultimately led to her demise and her committing suicide. So I think she experienced a lot of self-esteem blows, probably from her college years and then, on. But I think the trigger point of those, or the starting point, rather, of those things is when her father died. I don't know if she really ever recovered from that. And then other things within her life just kind of really was like this slow snowball effect with her and her emotions. So I think a lot of her poems reflected that. The Bell Jar was very telling of her life, and how she felt after her dad passed on, and very telling of her feelings about her mental illness and the treatment of that. There were some very light moments when she was, referred to her, she would refer to her, one of her college friends that she really admired. The girl was like very adventurous and very free, it seemed like sexually, but I think Miss Plath kind of had the struggle of wanting to be independent as with her education and with her writing, but she was kind of stuck in a place where I think her mom was very traditional, and she was, again, like I mentioned, very close with her mom, and her mom was like very conservative. So I think Miss Plath in her own person was struggling with being this independent person and not wanting to be traditional in the sense of her mom, but I think she respected her mom enough to kind of still hold fast to some of those traditional views. So her friend in the Bell Jar, she really admired her for being, really an attractive woman. Obviously, she was a smart woman because she was there at the college with Sylvia. But she was also very free and a sexual person. I think she had like many lovers and that sort of thing. So I think, Sylvia kind of envied that. So that's kind of a background synopsis of Miss Plath. She's a very celebrated poet, unfortunately, after her death, but certainly she, had a writing style all her own. She wrote a lot about, I felt like a lot about nature, and but it was a lot of metaphors and, how she felt, and it was very descriptive writing. I really enjoyed some, a lot of her poems. So we're going to move on to the clinical assessment report. So here's where kind of the twist comes in. So I'm going to imagine that Miss Plath is still alive and well, and so is her husband. And so I pretended that he called me. I'm a couples therapist. I'm a family and marriage therapist, and he's calling me for couples therapy because he had cheated. He admitted to me that they were both separated due to his infidelity within the relationship, and wanted me to help them. So I completed a clinical assessment report, complete with the Kansas Marital Satisfaction Scale, the Marital Status Inventory, and also the Revised Dyadic Adjustment Scale, to kind of give me an idea of where they both felt their relationship was. Really, the observations, Mr. Hughes completed the assessment without resistance. Ms. Plath seemed withdrawn, almost catatonic. When given the assessment, she appeared pensive, often staring at the paper for periods of time. And just, I guess, just her overall appearance made me want to complete a separate assessment of her, just due to her appearance, and also just her body language, and her lack of communication. So that just made me want to look more so into her. So really, just to give you a synopsis of the scoring, the Kansas marital satisfaction scale says that if you are 17 and above, you're non-distressed, or you have a non-distressed relationship. If it's 16 and below, there's some degree of distress. So let's see. Where's the score? Sorry, I had it together. So they scored a 10. So obviously there's some and also let me just say that I did an average of both of their scores to kind of come together their score in their relationship. For the revised dyadic adjustment scale, if you're above 48, then you're non-distressed within your relationship. If you're 47 and below, you're experiencing marital distress. And so they received a 30. So obviously they're having a lot of marital distress, as expected, because they're separated. And the marital status inventory, let's see, higher scores, I think there's a range from 0 to 14. Higher scores show marital instability. Lower scores, have marital stability. And I think there was even a point where it said a couple with a score of 8 is a couple that is separated, and they scored an 8. So that again shows that, from both of their perspectives, they know that there's trouble within their relationship, and that they could benefit from my help. But I think what was most telling was when I completed a clinical assessment of Miss Plath by herself, and kind of got more of a history with her suicide attempts before, and also the fact that she had been institutionalized in the past for what she says was depression, and she self-reported that. And her husband was there to confirm that she had a history of mental illness and institutionalization. My observation of her in the clinical assessment was that she completed the assessments without comment. She seemed lost in thought. Physically, she was very still, very stoic. And then at some point, she was weepy when she read some of the questions in the assessment. Overall, she completed the assessments. I chose to complete the Beck Depression Inventory, the Beck Hopelessness Scale, and also, the Beck, suicidal scale, due to her history of suicide. And I could say the discussion of the results were that she completed a lot of 1s and 2s, even reporting thoughts of suicide, worthlessness, sadness, self-dislike, and self-criticalness, resulting in a score of 30. And a 30 is like, with the Beck Depression Inventory, is very, let's see, 17 to 20, just to give you an idea. 17 to 20 is borderline clinical depression. 21 to 30 is moderate depression. 31 to 40 is severe depression, and over 40 is extreme depression. So she scored a 30. The Beck Hopelessness Scale generally scores above 8 or 9 are considered a clinical cutoff, and the client is at higher risk of suicide, and she scored a 12. The Beck Suicidal Scale, the general cutoff is 24. Clients above 24 is at significant risk for suicide, and Miss Plath